I never measured a man by how many hours he worked, but by what he learned in those hours. And if there's one principle I followed my whole life, it's this: never let a day go by without improving your mind. That's the 5-hour rule. 1 hour a day, 5 days a week. Reading, experimenting, thinking. It's not about genius. It's about habit. I built machines that lit the world, but it all started with quiet hours in my workshop, reading Dusty. Chemistry books by candlelight, long before I ever held a patent. You see, knowledge doesn't come from noise. It comes from patience, from setting time aside to read, to ask questions, to test your ideas in real time. That's how I outpaced rivals. While others guessed, I observed. While others talked, I learned. In a world of distractions, the mind that trains daily wins the future. So if you're serious about your own success, take a page from my notebook. Protect 1 hour each day like your life depends on it, because in the end, it just might. And if this kind of thinking lights a spark in you, then I suggest you subscribe to this channel. I'll be sharing more of the truths I lived by, truths forged not in theory, but in practice. Let's build something bright together. Chapter 1. The Habit of Mastery. Look around you. What do you see? A world built on habits, some powerful, most weak. In my time, I watched countless brilliant minds waste away because they couldn't grasp one simple truth. Genius without habit is like a lamp without oil. It might look impressive, but it won't light anything. Let me tell you about the real power of an hour. 1 hour, dedicated to learning every single day. It sounds simple, doesn't it? Almost too simple. But that's the beauty of it. While others searched for complicated formulas for success, I discovered that mastery hides in plain sight, in the quiet dedication of daily practice. I remember the early days in my workshop, before the world knew my name. Every morning, as the sun barely touched the horizon, I would sit with my books, my notes, and my questions. 1 hour. That's all I needed to start. 1 hour to read about the latest discoveries in chemistry, to sketch new ideas, to let my mind wander through the possibilities of electricity. You see, the human brain is like a muscle, but most people treat it like a vault, as if knowledge is something you store away and lock up. They couldn't be more wrong. The brain is alive, hungry, always ready to grow, but it needs consistent nourishment. Not occasional feasts of information, but steady, daily meals of learning. Think about how you learned to walk. You didn't attend a seminar on walking. You didn't read a book about it. You practiced, fell down, got up, and tried again. Every day without fail, until walking became as natural as breathing. That's what the 5-hour rule does to your mind. It turns learning from a chore into a reflex. I've seen it happen countless times in my laboratory. Young men would come to work for me, bright-eyed and full of ambition. Some would last, others wouldn't. The difference? It wasn't intelligence. No, it was something far more precious. The ability to dedicate that one sacred hour every day to improvement. When you protect that hour, when you guard it like the treasure it is, something remarkable happens. Your mind begins to anticipate it. Like a loyal friend, it starts preparing for these daily meetings. Ideas that seemed impossible become puzzles waiting to be solved. Problems that appeared insurmountable become challenges eager to be tackled. But here's what most people don't understand about mastery. It's not about the breakthroughs, those moments of brilliant insight that everyone celebrates. They're just the visible peaks of a mountain built one pebble at a time, 1 hour at a time. The real magic happens in those quiet moments of daily practice, when no one's watching, when there's no applause, just you and your commitment to growth. I didn't create the light bulb in a flash of inspiration. I built it through thousands of hours of methodical learning, testing, and refinement. Each failure taught me something new, and each lesson became another stone in the foundation of eventual success. That's what the habit of mastery does. It turns setbacks into stepping stones. You might be thinking, but Edison, you were different. You were born for this. Let me stop you right there. I wasn't born any different than you. What set me apart wasn't natural talent. It was unnatural persistence in learning. Every single day, rain or shine, success or failure, I dedicated time to feeding my mind. That's the secret, if you can call it that. There is no shortcut to mastery, but there is a path, 1 hour, 1 day at a time. So I challenge you, start today. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, not when circumstances are perfect. Today. Carve out that one precious hour. Guard it like your life depends on it, because in many ways it does. Your future self is being built in these quiet hours of deliberate learning. Remember, mastery isn't a destination, it's a habit. And habits, my friend, are built 1 hour at a time. Chapter 2. Curiosity before comfort. Most people live their entire lives in the warm embrace of comfort. They settle into routines, surround themselves with familiar ideas, and slowly, imperceptibly, they begin to die inside. I've seen it happen to the brightest minds. Comfort becomes their cage, and curiosity, their forgotten key. Let me tell you about the most dangerous moment in any inventor's life. It's not when an experiment fails or when funding runs dry. It's that subtle, seductive instant when you think you know enough, when the temptation to rest on your achievements whispers that you've learned all you need to know. I faced this demon countless times throughout my career, and I'll tell you what I learned. Curiosity must always come before comfort. In my workshop in Menlo Park, I had a simple rule: question everything, not just the failures, especially the successes. When we finally got the light bulb to work, do you know what I did? I gathered my team and asked, how can we make it better? They thought I was mad. We had just achieved what many called impossible, and here I was, disturbing our moment of triumph with more questions. But that's the secret most people miss. True innovation doesn't come from having answers. It comes from having better questions. Every morning when I opened my notebook, I didn't start with solutions. I started with curiosity. What if we tried a different filament? What if we changed the vacuum pressure? What if everything we thought we knew was wrong? You see, comfort is the enemy of discovery. It tells you to stick with what works, to avoid the unknown, to fear failure. But curiosity is the voice that says, yes, but what else is possible? It's the force that pushed me to try. Thousands of materials for the light bulb filament, even when everyone said I was wasting my time. I remember late nights in my laboratory, surrounded by failed experiments and half-formed ideas. The comfortable choice would have been to go home, to rest, to be satisfied with partial success. But curiosity kept me there, kept me questioning, kept me learning, because I understood something fundamental. The moment you choose comfort over curiosity, you choose stagnation over growth. Think about the questions that keep you awake at night, those nagging wonderings that your rational mind tries to silence. That's not insomnia. That's your curiosity trying to break free from the prison of comfort. Those questions are your mind's way of telling you there's more to learn, more to discover, more to understand. Here's a truth that might make you uncomfortable. Everything you know, everything you've achieved, everything you're proud of, it's not enough. Not because it isn't valuable, but because there's always more. The universe is infinite in its complexity, and your potential for learning is equally boundless. The moment you forget this, the moment you let comfort convince you that you've learned enough, is the moment you begin to obsolete yourself. I've trained hundreds of men in my laboratories, and I can tell you this: the ones who succeeded weren't always the most talented. They were the ones who maintained their curiosity even after they gained expertise. They were the ones who would master a process and immediately ask, what else can we try? They understood that comfort is not a destination, it's a warning sign. So how do you maintain this edge of curiosity? Start with your daily hour of learning. But don't just read what's comfortable. Don't just study what you already know. Push yourself into uncomfortable territory. If you're technical, read philosophy. If you're creative, study mathematics. Let your curiosity lead you past the boundaries of your comfort zone. Make it a habit to question your assumptions. Every day, Pick one thing you know to be true and ask yourself, what if I'm wrong? Not to prove yourself wrong, but to stay. Mentally flexible to keep your curiosity sharp and active. Remember, comfort is a temporary state, but curiosity is a lifelong companion. It will take you places you never imagined, show you possibilities you never considered, and yes, it will make you uncomfortable. But that discomfort, that's the feeling of your mind growing, expanding, becoming more than it was yesterday. Choose curiosity before comfort. Let it drive your daily learning. Let it push you past the easy answers to the deeper questions, because in the end, it's not what you know that will define you. It's what you're curious enough to discover.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you.
Chapter 3. The Workshop of the Mind. When people visited my workshop in Menlo Park, they'd often stand in awe of the tools, the machinery, the organized chaos of creation. But what they couldn't see was the most important workshop of all the hour, one I carried between my ears. Your mind is a workshop too, though most never learn to use it properly. Let me take you inside my daily ritual, the quiet hours that built empires. Every morning before the world stirred to life, I would sit at my desk with three things: a fresh notebook, a stack of scientific journals, and absolute silence. This wasn't just reading time. This was mental craftsmanship at its finest. You see, the mind needs a specific environment to do its best work. Just as a master carpenter keeps their tools clean and organized, a serious thinker needs to create the right conditions for deep learning. In my case, that meant early mornings, before the demands of the day could fragment my attention. I developed a system that I still consider one of my greatest inventions, though you won't find it in any patent office. For each hour of learning, I divided my notebook into 3 sections: facts, questions, and ideas. In the facts column, I wrote down anything concrete I learned: scientific principles, experimental results, observed phenomena. In the questions column, I listed every uncertainty, every puzzle that emerged from my reading. And in the ideas column, I let my mind play with possibilities. This wasn't just note-taking, it was mental architecture. Each section served a purpose in building stronger thinking habits. The facts grounded me in reality, the questions kept my curiosity sharp, and the ideas section gave my creativity room to expand and explore. But here's what most people miss about creating a mental workshop. It's not about the system itself. It's about the discipline of showing up every day. The most sophisticated learning method is worthless if you only use it occasionally. I didn't become an inventor because I had better ideas than others. I succeeded because I had a better process for developing those ideas, and I used that process religiously. Think about how a physical workshop functions. You don't walk in and immediately start building. You organize your tools, clean your workspace, review your plans. The same principles apply to your mind. That daily hour of learning, it's not just about absorbing information, it's about maintaining and improving your mental tools. I trained my mind to approach problems methodically, to break down complex challenges into manageable pieces. When I was working on the phonograph, I didn't start by trying to capture sound. I started by understanding the basic principles of sound waves, vibration, and material properties. Each morning's learning session added another tool to my mental workshop, another principle I could apply to the challenge at hand. Your mind craves this kind of structured exploration. It thrives on the combination of routine and discovery. When you sit down at the same time each day, in the same quiet space, with the same commitment to learning, something remarkable happens. Your brain begins to prepare itself for deep work. It's like a workshop that comes alive when the craftsman walks in, tools ready, surfaces cleared, waiting for the day's creation. But you must protect this space fiercely. The world will always try to invade your mental workshop with urgencies and distractions. In my time, it was telegrams and unexpected visitors. In your time, it's emails and notifications. The principle remains the same. Guard your learning time like you would guard any precious resource. Create rituals around your learning. I always kept my notebooks arranged in a specific order, my pencils sharpened, my reading material selected the night before. These weren't just habits, they were signals to my mind that it was time for serious work. Your brain responds to these cues just as it responds to the smell of coffee in the morning or the sound of an alarm clock. And remember this, your mental workshop should be a place of both discipline and joy. Yes, the work is serious, but it should also fill you with the excitement of discovery. I never walked into my workshop, physical or mental, without feeling a spark of anticipation. What would I learn today? What new connections would I make? What problems would I begin to solve? This is the true power of the 5-hour rule. It's not just about the time spent learning. It's about creating a space where that learning can take root and grow. Your mind is the most sophisticated workshop ever created. Treat it with the respect it deserves. Give it the time, the tools, and the attention it needs to do its best work. Build your mental workshop with care. Maintain it with discipline. Visit it daily with enthusiasm. Because in the end, the greatest inventions, the most profound discoveries, the most significant breakthroughs, they all begin in the workshop of the mind. Chapter 4. Read, record, reflect knowledge. Without a system is like electricity without wiring, raw power with nowhere to go. Throughout my life, I filled over 3,500 notebooks with observations, experiments, and ideas. But it wasn't the quantity that mattered, it was the method. Let me share with you the 3 pillars that turned mere information into innovation. Read, record, reflect. First, let's talk about reading. Most people read like they're skimming the morning paper, passive, distracted, waiting to be entertained. That's not reading, that's mental sleepwalking. When I read, I hunt. Every page is territory to be explored, every paragraph a potential goldmine of insight. I developed what I call the interrogation method of reading. Each book, each article, each technical paper faces the same questioning. What problem does this solve? What assumption does this challenge? What connection haven't I seen before? This isn't casual reading, it's intellectual excavation. But here's what separates the amateur from the master. Recording. Your mind is magnificent, but it's also unreliable. Thoughts that seem unforgettable at midnight become whispers by morning. That's why I never trust memory alone. Everything of value must be captured, preserved, made permanent through careful recording. In my workshops, I enforced a strict policy. If it isn't written down, it didn't happen. Every experiment, every observation, every random thought that might lead somewhere, all of it went into the notebooks. But not in some haphazard way. Each entry was dated, categorized, cross-referenced. This wasn't just record-keeping. It was creating a map of possibilities. Let me show you how this works in practice. When I was developing the electric light, I didn't just read about electricity. I read about glass manufacturing, about vacuum pumps, about the properties of different metals. In my notebooks, these seemingly unrelated pieces of knowledge began to form patterns. But those patterns only emerged because I had a system for capturing and connecting information. You might be thinking, but Edison, we have computers now. We can store everything digitally. Yes, and that's both a blessing and a curse. Digital tools can help organize information, but they can also create the illusion of knowledge. There is a profound difference between having information at your fingertips and having it integrated into your understanding. This brings us to the 3rd pillar, reflection. This is where most people fall short. They read, some even record, but few truly reflect. Reflection is the process of turning information into insight, of making knowledge your own. It's not enough to know what others have discovered. You must understand how their discoveries connect to your own questions and challenges. I made it a habit to review my notebooks regularly, not just to refresh my memory, but to look for connections I might have missed. Sometimes the solution to a current problem was hidden in notes I'd taken months or years earlier. This wasn't luck. It was the power of systematic reflection. Here's a practice I want you to adopt. At the end of each learning session, take 5 minutes to write down not just what you learned, but what questions it raised. What assumptions did it challenge? What new possibilities did it suggest? This simple habit will transform how you think about information. In your daily hour of learning, divide your time this way. Spend 40 minutes reading deeply and recording carefully. Then use the remaining 20 minutes for reflection. Ask yourself, how does this connect to what I already know? What problems might this help me solve? What experiments should I try based on this knowledge? Your notebooks, whether physical or digital, should be more than repositories of information. They should be conversation partners in your journey of discovery. When I look back through my old notebooks, I'm not just reading facts and figures. I'm tracing the evolution of ideas, seeing how one insight led to another, understanding how failures pointed the way to success. Create a system that works for you, but make sure it includes these 3 elements: active reading that engages deeply with the material, systematic recording that captures not just facts, but connections and questions, and regular reflection that transforms information into understanding. Remember, the goal isn't to collect information, it's to create insight. Every page you read, every note you take, every moment you spend in reflection is building something larger than the sum of its parts. You're not just learning facts. You're developing the ability to see connections that others miss. This system turned me from a curious tinkerer into an inventor who changed the world. It can do the same for you, but only if you approach it with the same rigor, the same dedication, the same commitment to excellence. Read with purpose, record with precision, reflect with patience. These are the tools that will build your future, one page, one note, one insight at a time. Chapter 5, Learning by Doing and Failing. Let me tell you about my 10,000th failure. Not my first, not my most famous, but my 10,000th. By then, most men would have quit. Most would have decided that perhaps invention wasn't their calling. But I had learned something that most never understand. Failure isn't the opposite of learning, it's the engine of it. In my laboratory, we had a saying, we now know 1,000 ways not to build a light bulb. Every failed experiment, every burnt-out filament, every shattered bulb taught us something new. This wasn't empty optimism. This was practical science. Each failure narrowed the field of possibilities, pointed us closer to what would actually work. Most people approach learning backwards. They want to understand everything before they try anything. They read every book, attend every lecture, memorize every theory, and still they hesitate to begin. But here's the truth I learned through decades of invention. The deepest learning happens in the doing, not in the preparing to do. Think about how a child learns to walk. They don't study physics. They don't calculate angles and forces. They stand up, they fall down, they try again. Each attempt, each failure, teaches them something their muscles remember better than their mind ever could. This is how real learning works, through action, through attempt, through failure. When I was developing the phonograph, everyone said it was impossible. The leading scientists of the day had proven, with elegant mathematics and sound theories, why you couldn't capture sound and play it back. But I wasn't interested in their theories. I was interested in results. So I experimented. I failed. I learned. And eventually I succeeded where their theories said success was impossible. Here's what most people get wrong about failure. They see it as an event, as an ending. But failure is a process, a tool, a way of eliminating what doesn't work to discover what does. When you embrace this perspective, failure loses its sting. It becomes data, nothing more, nothing less. In your daily hour of learning, don't just read about your subject, experiment with it. If you're studying programming, write code that breaks. If you're learning business, start small projects that might fail. If you're exploring art, make bad drawings. The key is to combine theory with practice, to let your failures guide your learning. I developed a method I called productive failure. For every experiment, I would write down 3 things: what I expected to happen, what actually happened, and what that difference taught me. This simple practice turned every failure into a lesson, every setback into a step forward. But let me be clear. This isn't about failing randomly. It's about failing intelligently, systematically, purposefully. Each failure should teach you something specific, should eliminate one possibility, should point you toward what might work. This is why recording your failures is as important as recording your successes. In my workshop, I kept what I called a failure log. Every failed experiment was documented in detail: the materials used, the conditions, the results, and most importantly, what we learned. This wasn't an exercise in self-punishment. It was a valuable resource, often the solution to a current problem could be found in the careful documentation of past failures. You need to develop the emotional resilience to fail repeatedly without losing enthusiasm. This isn't natural. Society teaches us to fear failure, to avoid it at all costs. But if you're serious about learning, about growing, about creating something new, you must unlearn this fear. Start small. Set up experiments you can afford to fail. Document everything. Learn from each attempt. Build your tolerance for failure gradually, systematically, purposefully. Remember, every master was once a disaster. The difference is they kept going, kept learning, kept failing forward. In your daily practice, make failure a friend. Don't just read about your subject. Test your understanding. Try to solve problems before looking at the solutions. Make predictions and test them. Be wrong often and early. It's the fastest way to eventually be right. The world remembers my successes: the light bulb, the phonograph, the motion picture camera. But my notebooks tell a different story. They're filled with thousands of failures, each one a lesson, each one a step toward eventual success. This is the real story of innovation, of learning, of mastery. So embrace failure as your teacher. Document it, learn from it, let it guide you toward success. Because in the end, it's not about avoiding failure, it's about failing better, failing forward, failing toward your goals. This is how real learning happens. This is how innovation works. This is how you build something that lasts. Chapter 6. Protect the hour. Time is the one resource you can never multiply. I learned this lesson early in my career, watching brilliant minds waste their potential because they couldn't protect their most valuable asset, their learning time. Let me tell you about the most important hour of your day and why you must defend it like your life depends on it. In my workshop at Menlo Park, we had a sacred rule. The morning hour was untouchable. No meetings, no visitors, no interruptions. My assistants knew that disturbing this hour meant immediate dismissal. This wasn't arrogance, it was necessity. Because I understood something that took me years to learn. The quality of your thinking determines the quality of your life. Most people treat their time like loose change. They let it slip through their fingers in small amounts until they're left wondering where it all went. They say they don't have time to learn, to grow, to experiment. But here's the truth. You don't find time, you make it. You carve it out of the chaos of daily life, and you protect it with everything you have. Think about this. In the time it takes to scroll through social media, you could read 3 pages of a life-changing book. In the time spent watching others live their lives, you could be building your own. This isn't about guilt, it's about choices. Every minute you spend is an investment in who you're becoming. When I was developing the electric light system, the world was full of urgent demands. Investors wanted updates, competitors were watching, the press was hungry for stories. But I knew that if I didn't protect my learning time, if I didn't maintain that sacred hour for reading and experimentation, all those urgent matters wouldn't matter at all. Because without continuous learning, without daily improvement, we would fall behind. Here's how you protect your hour. First, identify your peak time. For me, it was early morning, when the world was still quiet and my mind was fresh. Your time might be different. Find it, claim it, then build walls around it, not physical walls, but boundaries of habit and discipline. Turn your hour into a ritual. Same time, same place, same commitment every day. Your mind will begin to expect it, to prepare for it, to hunger for it. This isn't just about time management, it's about energy management. One focused hour is worth more than 4 scattered hours. But here's where most people fail. They don't defend their hour against the tyranny of the urgent. The world will always try to steal your time, to fill your spaces with its priorities. You must learn to say no, not just to others, but to your own impulses to check messages, to respond to minor emergencies, to let the outside world invade. Your learning sanctuary. I developed what I call the submarine protocol. When I dove into my learning hour, I went deep. No distractions were allowed to surface. This meant training everyone around me to respect this time. But more importantly, it meant training myself to focus completely on the task at hand. Create systems to protect your hour. Put your devices in another room. Let calls go to voicemail. The world can wait. What can't wait is your development, your growth, your progression toward mastery. Because here's the brutal truth. If you don't protect your learning time, no one else will. Some will call you selfish. Let them. Some will say you're being antisocial. Accept it. Because what they don't understand is that by protecting your hour, by investing in your growth, you're actually preparing yourself to give more value to others. The light bulb wasn't invented in meetings, it was conceived in those. Quiet hours of focused learning and experimentation. Start small if you must, but start now. Protect 30 minutes if an hour seems impossible. Build up to it. Train your mind, your family, your colleagues to respect this boundary. Be polite but firm. Be flexible about when your hour occurs, but inflexible about ensuring it happens. Remember, this isn't just about learning, it's about becoming. Every protected hour is a brick in the foundation of your future self. Every book read, every experiment attempted, every reflection captured is shaping who you will become. This is why you must guard this time so fiercely the world will try to convince you that everything is urgent, that every notification demands immediate attention, that every request requires instant response. Don't believe it. The truly important things, learning, growing, creating, rarely come with push notifications. Protect your hour. Guard it. Honor it. Let it become the cornerstone of your daily practice, because in the end, it's not just an hour you're protecting. It's your potential, your future, your chance to create something meaningful in this world. And that, my friend, is worth fighting for. Chapter 7. Books that lit my mind. Let me tell you about the books that changed my life, not because of what they contained, but because of how I read them. You see, there's a profound difference between reading for entertainment and reading for transformation. I didn't just read books, I mined them for insights that could light up the world. In my personal library, I kept volumes on chemistry, mechanics, physics, and mathematics. But I also studied philosophy, history, and literature. Why? Because I understood something crucial. Innovation doesn't happen in isolation. The biggest breakthroughs often come from connecting ideas across disciplines. When I was developing the electric light system, I didn't just read about electricity. I studied materials, science to understand filaments, chemistry to grasp the properties of gases, economics to plan distribution systems. Each book was a tool, each page a potential key to unlock the next breakthrough. But here's what most people get wrong about reading. They think it's about accumulating information. It's not. It's about developing understanding. When I read about Faraday's experiments with electromagnetic induction, I wasn't memorizing facts. I was visualizing principles, imagining applications, seeing connections that others had missed. Developed what I call the cross-pollination method of reading. Take 3 books from different fields and read them simultaneously. Look for patterns, for principles that echo across disciplines. When I read about the flow of water in hydraulics texts, I saw parallels with electrical current. When I studied the principles of sound waves, I found insights that later helped with electrical transmission. Your reading should be both deep and wide. Deep enough to truly understand the principles at work, wide enough to see unexpected connections. This isn't about becoming a dilettante. It's about building a mental library of principles and possibilities. In my notebooks, I kept what I called idea bridges, connections between seemingly unrelated concepts. The phonograph was born partly because I understood both sound waves and mechanical engraving. The motion picture camera came from connecting principles of human vision with mechanical precision. These weren't random insights. They were the result of systematic, curious reading. Let me share my method for extracting maximum value from books. First, never read passively. Approach each book with questions. What problem is this solving? How does this principle work? Where else could this be applied? Make your reading an active dialogue with the author. Second, maintain what I call a principle registry. When you encounter a fundamental principle, whether in science, engineering, or human nature, record it. These principles become the building blocks of innovation. The law of conservation of energy taught me as much about business as it did about physics. Third, practice what I call imaginative reading. Don't just absorb what's on the page, project it into new contexts. When I read about chemical reactions, I would imagine them at different scales, under different conditions. This mental experimentation often led to practical insights. Your daily reading hour should be structured. Spend the first 15 minutes reviewing your previous notes and questions. Then dive deep into new material, but always with a purpose. The last 15 minutes should be for reflection and connection making. What did you learn? How does it connect to what you already know? What new questions has it raised? Build your library strategically. Don't just collect books, curate them. Every book should earn its place on your shelf by contributing to your understanding of fundamental principles. I kept books that challenged my assumptions, that offered new perspectives, that forced me to think in new ways. Remember, the goal isn't to read many books, it's to understand deeply the ones you do read. I would often spend weeks with a single volume, exploring its implications, testing its principles, finding its limitations. This wasn't slow reading, it was thorough learning. Create a system for capturing insights. In my notebooks, I had sections for principles, questions, and applications. When I read about a new scientific discovery, I would immediately consider its practical applications. This wasn't just academic exercise, it was practical innovation. Your reading should challenge you. If you find yourself nodding along with everything, you're probably reading the wrong books. Look for works that make you question your assumptions, that force you to think deeply, that open new possibilities. The books that truly lit my mind weren't always the famous ones. Sometimes an obscure technical manual would contain the key insight that unlocked a new invention. The value wasn't in the book's reputation. It was in how it connected to my questions, my challenges, my pursuit of understanding. Make your reading time sacred, but make it active. Don't just consume information, engage with it, challenge it, connect it to your world. Because in the end, it's not about how many books you read, it's about how deeply you understand and apply what you read. This is how reading becomes a tool for transformation, not just information. Chapter 8. Thinking in Systems. Most people see parts. I learned to see systems. When others looked at a light bulb, they saw glass and wire. I saw a network that would illuminate cities. This wasn't just vision, it was a different way of thinking, a method of understanding that turned isolated facts into working systems. Let me show you how systems thinking transformed my approach to innovation. When I set out to create the electric light, I wasn't just inventing a bulb, I was designing an entire ecosystem. Generation plants, distribution networks, metering systems, home wiring, each component had to work in harmony with the others. This wasn't complexity for its own sake. It was understanding that real innovation happens at the system level. Most inventors fail not because their ideas are bad, but because they don't understand the system their invention must live in. They create solutions in isolation, then wonder why the world doesn't embrace them. I learned early that success requires understanding the entire ecosystem your idea will inhabit. In your daily learning, start training yourself to see systems. When you study any subject, ask yourself, what are the interconnections? What are the feedback loops? What are the dependencies that others might miss? This isn't just academic exercise, it's practical power. I developed what I call the ripple method of analysis. When examining any problem or opportunity, I would trace the ripples outward. If we change this component, what else must change? If we improve this process, what new challenges will that create? This systematic thinking helped me anticipate problems before they arose. In my notebooks, I created system maps, visual representations of how different components interacted. When working on the phonograph, I didn't just diagram the mechanical parts. I mapped the entire journey of sound from vibration to recording to storage to playback. Each step revealed new challenges, new opportunities, new connections to explore. Here's a practical exercise I want you to try. Take any process you're familiar with and map its complete system. If it's making coffee, don't just list the steps. Map the entire journey from bean to cup, including growth, harvesting, shipping, roasting, grinding, brewing, and consumption. See how each step affects the others. Understanding systems changes how you solve problems. Instead of looking for quick fixes, you start seeking balanced solutions that work within the larger context. When I was developing the electrical system, every improvement had to be evaluated not just on its own merits, but on how it affected the entire network. Most people think linearly, A causes B causes C, but reality is more complex. A might cause B, which affects C, which loops back to influence A. These feedback loops are where the real magic happens. In your daily hour of learning, train yourself to spot these circular relationships. I created what I called system journals. Each page was dedicated to a different system I was studying: electrical distribution, sound reproduction, material manufacturing. But the power came from connecting these systems, seeing how principles from one could inform solutions in another. Your mind needs to become comfortable with complexity without being overwhelmed by it. Start small. Take a simple process and break it down into its components. Then start connecting those components, seeing how they influence each other. Gradually increase the complexity as your understanding grows. Remember, systems thinking isn't about making things complicated. It's about understanding the complexity that already exists. When I developed the electric light system, I wasn't adding complexity. I was managing the complexity inherent in delivering power to millions of homes. Train yourself to look for leverage points, places in a system where small changes can have big effects. In the electrical system, improving the efficiency of generators had a ripple effect through the entire network. These leverage points are where innovation becomes multiplication rather than addition. In your daily practice, start building system models. They don't have to be complex. Start with simple diagrams showing how different elements connect and influence each other. Over time, these models will become more sophisticated, more nuanced, more useful. Most importantly, understand that systems are dynamic. They change over time, adapt to conditions, respond to interventions. Your thinking must be equally dynamic. Don't just map systems once. Revisit your understanding regularly, update your models, refine your thinking. The world doesn't operate in isolation, and neither should your learning. Every fact you acquire, every skill you develop, every insight you gain should be connected to the larger systems they operate within. This is how knowledge becomes power, not through accumulation, but through integration. Think in systems. See the connections. Understand the feedback loops. Map the dependencies. Because in the end, success doesn't come from seeing parts. It comes from understanding and working with the whole. This is how you create innovations that last. Solutions that scale, changes that matter. Chapter 9. Mental Endurance Over. Eek, let me tell you about the most brilliant failure I ever hired. He had degrees from the finest universities, could solve complex equations in his head, and impressed everyone with his quick wit. He lasted exactly 3 weeks in my laboratory. Why? Because he lacked the one quality that matters more than raw intelligence: mental endurance. I've seen it time and again. Genius without stamina is like a rocket without fuel. It might look impressive on the launch pad, but it won't get you to your destination. In my years of invention, I learned that success doesn't go to the smartest person in the room. It goes to the one who can maintain clear, focused thinking. The longest, most people misunderstand what mental endurance really is. They think it's about pushing through fatigue, gritting your teeth, forcing yourself to continue. But that's not it at all. True mental endurance is about maintaining quality of thought over time. It's about being able to think as clearly in hour 5 as you did in hour 1. In my laboratory, I developed what I call the marathon mind method. Just as a marathon runner trains their body to handle longer distances, you must train your mind to maintain focus and clarity over extended periods. This isn't about natural talent, it's about deliberate practice. Let me share the system I used to build mental endurance. First, understand that, like physical endurance, mental stamina must be built gradually. Start with your daily hour of focused learning. Make it non-negotiable. Then, slowly, systematically, extend the duration and complexity of your mental tasks. Most people try to sprint through their learning, cramming information in bursts of intense study. But that's not how the mind works best. I found that steady, consistent effort yields better results than sporadic bursts of intensity. It's not about how fast you can think, it's about how long you can think well. In my workshops, I instituted what I called thinking shifts. Just as factory workers had shifts for physical labor, we had shifts for mental work. Each person would focus on a specific problem for a set period, then switch to something entirely different. This wasn't about avoiding fatigue. It was about building endurance through variety. Here's a practical exercise to build your mental stamina. Start with a complex problem, something that requires deep thought, but isn't overwhelming. Work on it continuously without distractions for your set time period. Document your thinking process. Notice when your mind starts to wander, when your thoughts become less clear. These are your current limits. Now, work to extend them. The key to mental endurance isn't pushing through exhaustion. It's learning to maintain clarity without depleting yourself. I developed a technique I called sustainable thinking. Like a well-designed engine, your mind should be able to run continuously. Without overheating, most people never discover their true mental capacity because they quit at the first sign of fatigue. But here's what I learned. Mental fatigue, like physical fatigue, is often more about perception than reality. Your mind can go much further than you think, but you have to train it systematically. Create what I call mental checkpoints. Every 30 minutes during extended thinking sessions, assess your clarity. Are your thoughts as precise as they were at the start? Is your reasoning as sharp? If not, don't push harder. Adjust your approach. Sometimes changing your thinking angle is better than forcing your current path. Build recovery into your practice. Just as athletes need rest days, your mind needs time to consolidate and refresh. But make this recovery active: light reading, gentle problem-solving, reflection. The goal is to maintain mental engagement while allowing for deeper recovery. Your daily learning practice. Start tracking your mental endurance. Notice when your focus begins to fade, when your thoughts become less crisp. Don't judge these moments. Study them. Understanding your current limits is the first step to extending them. Remember, mental endurance isn't about never getting tired. It's about maintaining effectiveness even when you're tired. The greatest innovations often come not in the burst of initial inspiration, but in the long hours of sustained, focused development that follow. Train your mind like an athlete trains their body. Progressive overload, proper recovery, consistent practice. Your daily hour of learning isn't just about acquiring knowledge, it's about building the mental stamina to use that knowledge effectively over time. Most importantly, understand that mental endurance is a skill, not a talent. It can be developed, improved, mastered. Every time you maintain focus a little longer, solve problems a little deeper, think a little clearer, you're building this crucial capability. This is why the 5-hour rule isn't just about the time spent learning. It's about building the mental endurance to make that learning truly valuable. Because in the end, it's not the brightest mind that changes the world. It's the one that can stay focused, clear, and effective long enough to turn ideas into reality. Chapter 10. The company you keep matters. Your mind is shaped by the minds it encounters. This isn't philosophy, it's practical truth. I didn't build my laboratory at Menlo Park just to have a place to work. I built it to create an environment where great minds could collide, where ideas could cross-pollinate, where innovation was as natural as breathing. Let me tell you about the power of intellectual environment. When I brought together my team of muckers, my trusted experimenters, and fellow inventors, I wasn't just hiring employees. I was creating a living ecosystem of innovation. Every person brought their own knowledge, their own perspective, their own way of seeing problems and possibilities. Most people underestimate the importance of their intellectual environment. They think learning is a solo journey, that genius works in isolation. Nothing could be further from the truth. The greatest breakthroughs happen when different minds, different approaches, different ways of thinking come together in an environment designed for discovery. In my workshop, I instituted what I called the collision principle. Every day, we would deliberately bring together people working on different projects, with different expertise, with different approaches, not for formal meetings, for organic interactions. Because I learned that some of the most valuable insights come from unexpected connections, your mind needs challenge to grow. It needs to encounter different perspectives, different approaches, different ways of thinking. This doesn't mean you need your own laboratory, but it does mean you need to be intentional about the minds you interact with, the conversations you engage in, the intellectual environment you create for yourself. I developed what I call the mental ecosystem approach. Just as a healthy natural ecosystem needs diversity to thrive, your intellectual environment needs variety, technical minds and creative minds, theoretical thinkers and practical doers, veterans with deep experience and newcomers with fresh perspectives. Enjoy your daily learning practice. Don't just focus on consuming information. Focus on creating opportunities for intellectual exchange. Find people who know what you don't. Seek out those who challenge your assumptions. Look for minds that complement, not just confirm, your way of thinking. Create what I call learning circles. These aren't study groups, they're intellectual ecosystems where different kinds of knowledge can interact. In my laboratory, we had regular sessions where everyone would share what they were learning, what problems they were tackling, what insights they had gained. The magic wasn't in the individual pieces, it was in the connections that emerged. Most people make the mistake of surrounding themselves with minds too similar to their own. They seek comfort in shared perspectives rather than growth through difference. But real innovation happens at the edges where different types of knowledge meet. Build what I call intellectual diversity into your environment. If you're technical, seek out artists. If you're practical, engage with theorists. If you're a specialist, talk to generalists. These interactions aren't just interesting. They're essential for developing the kind of thinking that leads to breakthroughs. Your daily hour of learning should include time for intellectual exchange. Read widely, yes, but also engage with other minds. Share what you're learning. Ask questions. Challenge assumptions. The goal isn't agreement, it's growth through interaction. Create spaces for what I call productive conflict, not personal. arguments, but the healthy collision of different ideas, different approaches, different ways of seeing the world. In my laboratory, some of our best innovations came from disagreements that forced us to think deeper, to question our assumptions, to find new ways forward. Remember, the quality of your thinking is directly influenced by the quality of minds you interact with. This doesn't mean you need to surround yourself with geniuses, but it does mean you need to be intentional about creating an environment that challenges and enhances your thinking. In your learning practice, make connection as important as consumption. Don't just acquire knowledge, share it. Don't just solve problems, discuss them. Don't just have ideas, test them against other perspectives. This is how individual learning becomes collective innovation. The 5-hour rule isn't just about personal study, it's about creating an environment where learning can flourish. Choose your intellectual companions carefully. Seek out those who challenge you to think deeper, to see differently, to grow continuously. Build your mental ecosystem with intention. Every mind you encounter, every conversation you engage in, every intellectual environment you enter should contribute to your growth, because in the end, the greatest innovations don't come from isolated genius, they come from minds working together, challenging each other, building on each other's insights. Chapter 11, Turning Notebooks into Gold mine. 3,500 notebooks weren't just paper and ink. They were the foundation of an empire, the seeds of innovation that changed the world. But here's what most people don't understand. It wasn't the quantity of notes that mattered. It was the system, the method, the deliberate practice of turning observations into insights and insights into innovations. Let me show you how a simple notebook can become your most powerful tool for learning and creation. When I started my career, I couldn't afford expensive equipment or elaborate laboratories, but I could afford a notebook and a pencil. What I discovered was that the right system of note-taking was worth more than any physical tool. Most people treat their notebooks like diaries, passive records of thoughts and events. But a proper notebook should be a working tool, an extension of your thinking process, a laboratory for your ideas. I developed what I call the active documentation method. Every entry should serve a purpose, advance your understanding, or capture a potential breakthrough. In my system, each notebook had multiple sections: observations, questions, hypotheses, and experiments. But the real power wasn't in the categories. It was in how they connected. An observation would lead to questions, questions to hypotheses, hypotheses to experiments, and the cycle would continue. This wasn't just recording. It was a systematic approach to discovery. Here's the method I used. First, create clear categories for your notes. Don't just write randomly, organize your thinking. In my notebooks, I used a simple but effective system: left pages for observations and data, right pages for analysis and ideas. This created a natural dialogue between fact and possibility. Most importantly, develop what I call connective notation. When an idea in one part of your notebook relates to an observation in another, create a clear link. I used a simple numbering system and cross-references. This turns your notebook from a linear record into a network of connected insights. Your daily learning hour should include dedicated time for proper documentation. Don't just read and forget. Capture and connect. I developed a practice I called thought mapping. After reading or experimenting, I would spend time drawing connections between new information and existing knowledge. This wasn't just review, it was active synthesis. Create what I call idea incubators in your notebooks. These are spaces where you let thoughts develop over time. When you encounter a promising idea, give it room to grow. Return to it regularly, add new connections, explore different angles. Some of my greatest inventions started as small notes that grew through this process. Build a system for rapid capture. Ideas don't always come during convenient times. I kept small notebooks in every room of my house and laboratory. But quick. Capture is just the start. You need a system for reviewing and developing these captured thoughts. Set aside time each week to review and organize your notes. Develop what I call progressive documentation. Don't just record facts, record your developing understanding. When you return to earlier notes, add new insights, make new connections, deepen your comprehension. Your notebooks should show the evolution of your thinking. Remember, your notebooks are not just for storing information, they're tools for generating insights. I developed a practice of regular review and synthesis. Every week, I would spend time looking through recent notes, finding patterns, making connections, generating new questions to explore. Create what I call problem pages in your notebooks. These are dedicated spaces where you break down complex challenges into smaller components, map out the elements, sketch possible solutions, note related principles from other fields. This systematic approach turns overwhelming problems into manageable pieces. Your notebook system should grow with you. As your understanding deepens, your documentation methods should evolve. I constantly refined my system, adding new categories, improving cross-references, developing better ways to capture and connect ideas, build verification into your system. When you make an observation or form a hypothesis, create clear ways to test and validate your thinking. My notebooks weren't just repositories of ideas, they were roadmaps for experimentation and verification. Most importantly, understand that your notebooks are not just personal records, they're professional tools. Treat them with appropriate rigor. Date every entry. Create clear indexes. Make your documentation clear enough that others could follow your thinking. This isn't just good practice. It's how you build a legacy of knowledge. The true value of notebooks isn't in the individual entries. It's in the connections between them. Develop systems for finding and strengthening these connections. Regular review, cross-referencing, and synthesis turn isolated notes into networks of knowledge. Your notebooks should become more valuable over time. As you add more entries, make more connections, develop deeper understanding. Their worth as tools for innovation increases. This is how simple notebooks become gold mines of insight and innovation. Chapter 12. You're not behind. You're untrained. Let me tell you about the most dangerous lie people tell themselves. I'm too far behind to start now. I've heard this excuse from countless brilliant minds, watched it kill more potential than any technical challenge ever could. But here's the truth. You're not behind. You're untrained. And that's a problem we can solve. In my laboratory, I once hired a man who was 43 years old. He had no formal education, no technical training, just an insatiable desire to learn. The other engineers laughed at first. 6 months later, he was leading his own experiments. Why? Because he understood something they didn't. The mind doesn't care about your starting point. It cares about your training regimen. Most people misunderstand the nature of learning. They think it's about accumulating information, about catching up to some imaginary standard. But real learning isn't about where you start. It's about how consistently you train. I've seen university graduates falter while self-taught experimenters thrived. The difference wasn't background. It was dedication to daily improvement. Let me share what I call the compound learning principle. Just as money grows through compound interest, knowledge grows through consistent investment. 1 hour a day, every day, creates a momentum that no amount of sporadic cramming can match. This isn't about racing to catch up. It's about building sustainable growth. Think about learning like building muscle. If you walked into a gym for the first time, you wouldn't expect to lift the heaviest weights immediately. You'd start where you are, focus on proper form, and build strength gradually. The mind works the same way. Start with what you can handle, maintain proper learning form, and build intellectual strength systematically. I developed what I call the progressive mastery method. Instead of trying to learn everything at once, focus on mastering one fundamental principle at a time. In my early days studying electricity, I didn't try to understand everything about it immediately. I started with basic principles, mastered them completely, then built upon that foundation. Here's a practical approach to starting from wherever you are. First, audit your current knowledge honestly. No shame, no judgment, just clear assessment. Then identify the fundamental principles you need to understand. Create a progression plan that takes you from where you are to where you need to be, one step at a time. Most people fail not because they start too late, but because they try to skip steps. They see others working with advanced concepts and try to jump straight there. This is like trying to run before you can walk. Every significant achievement is built on mastery of fundamentals. Create what I call learning scaffolding. Just as a building rises one floor at a time, build your knowledge systematically. Each new concept should rest firmly on what you've already mastered. This isn't slow learning. It's sustainable learning. It's how you build understanding that lasts. Your daily hour of learning should be tailored to your current level, not someone else's expectations. Focus on mastering what's in front of you now. Excellence isn't about knowing everything. It's about thoroughly understanding what you study. I'd rather have someone on my team who deeply understands basic principles than someone with superficial knowledge of advanced concepts. Remember, every expert began as a novice. When I started experimenting with electricity, I knew nothing. My advantage wasn't natural talent or early start. It was systematic, daily learning. I built my knowledge piece by piece, principle by principle, experiment by experiment. Develop what I call foundation focus. Instead of being overwhelmed by everything you don't know, concentrate on building solid fundamentals. Every field has core principles. Master these, and more advanced concepts become easier to grasp. This isn't about going slow. It's about building speed through proper preparation. Your starting point is irrelevant. Your learning system is everything. I've seen people transform themselves in months through systematic study. The key isn't where they began. It's how they structured their learning, how consistently they applied themselves, how thoroughly they mastered each step before moving to the next. Most importantly, understand that learning is not a race against others, it's a journey of personal growth. The only meaningful comparison is between who you are today and who you were yesterday. Focus on consistent improvement, not catching up to some arbitrary standard. Stop telling yourself you're behind. Start treating your mind like what it is, a powerful tool that responds to proper training. Create your learning plan. Commit to your daily practice. Focus on mastery of fundamentals. Build your knowledge systematically, intentionally, consistently. Because here's the truth. The best time to start learning was yesterday. The second best time is today. Not because you're behind, but because your mind is ready for training, ready for growth, ready for transformation. All it needs is your commitment to systematic daily practice. Chapter 13. Train like a scientist, not a student. There's a fundamental difference between studying and discovering. Students memorize what's known, scientists explore what isn't. In my years of invention and innovation, I learned that true learning isn't about absorbing information, it's about investigating reality. Let me show you how to transform your learning from passive study to active discovery. Most people approach learning like students preparing for an exam. They try to memorize facts, remember procedures, repeat what others have said. But real innovation, real understanding, comes from approaching learning like a scientist. Scientists don't just accept information, they test it, question it, explore its limits and possibilities. In my laboratory, I developed what I call the experimental mindset. Every piece of information becomes a hypothesis to be tested. Every accepted fact becomes a question to be explored. This isn't about being skeptical, it's about being curious. It's about treating knowledge not as something to be accumulated, but as something to be investigated. Think about how a scientist approaches a new phenomenon. They observe carefully, form hypotheses, design experiments, analyze results. This isn't just for laboratory work, it's a powerful approach to any kind of learning. When I studied electricity, I didn't just read about it. I tested every principle, explored every possibility, questioned every assumption. Your daily learning hour should be structured like a scientific investigation. Start with clear questions. Form specific hypotheses. Design ways to test your understanding. Analyze the results. This isn't just reading and memorizing. It's systematic exploration and discovery. I created what I call the Discovery Protocol. For every new concept you encounter, ask, how can I test this? What experiments could verify or challenge this understanding? What predictions does this knowledge make? And how can I check them? This transforms passive learning into active investigation. Most people make the mistake of trying to learn too much too quickly. Scientists know that deep understanding comes from thorough investigation of specific phenomena. In your learning, focus on depth over breadth. It's better to thoroughly understand one principle than to have superficial knowledge of many. Develop what I call experimental documentation. Don't just take notes. Record your questions, your hypotheses, your tests, your results. Create a living record of your investigations. This isn't just for memory. It's for developing systematic thinking, for building a foundation for future discoveries. Your mind is a laboratory, not just a library. Every piece of information you encounter should be treated as raw material for experimentation. When I read about a new scientific principle, I immediately started thinking about how to test it, how to apply it, how to explore its boundaries. Create what I call learning experiments. These aren't just mental exercises, they're practical tests of understanding. If you're learning a new principle, design small experiments to verify your understanding. If you're studying a new concept, find ways to test it in the real world. Remember, scientists don't just learn facts, they discover principles. When you encounter new information, look for the underlying principles. These are what transfer between fields, what enable real innovation. I often found that principles discovered in one field led to breakthroughs in another. Build what I call experimental cycles into your learning. Observe, hypothesize, test, analyze, refine, then repeat. This isn't just a method, it's a mindset. It turns learning from a passive process of absorption into an active process of discovery. Your daily practice should include time for both study and experimentation. Read to understand what others have discovered, but always move quickly to testing and applying that knowledge. Real understanding comes not from reading about principles, but from working with them directly. Develop what I call investigative intuition. This isn't about wild guessing. It's about training your mind to ask the right questions, to spot patterns, to see possibilities. Scientists don't just follow procedures, they develop instincts for where to look, what to question, how to investigate. Most importantly, maintain what I call experimental humility. Scientists know that being wrong is as valuable as being right, sometimes more so. Every failed experiment teaches something important. Every unexpected result opens new possibilities for investigation. Train your mind to see learning as discovery, not just acquisition. Approach each new subject not as a collection of facts to be memorized, but as a territory to be explored. Because in the end, the greatest innovations don't come from knowing what others have discovered. They come from discovering what others haven't yet seen. Chapter 14. What 1,093 patents really mean. When people hear about my 193 patents, they often imagine sudden breakthroughs, moments of brilliant inspiration, the myth of overnight success. Let me tell you what those patents really represent. Thousands of hours of systematic learning, countless experiments, and an unwavering commitment to daily improvement. Each patent isn't just an invention, it's a story of persistent, methodical growth. Most people see the end result, the light bulb, the phonograph, the motion picture camera, but they miss the real story. Behind each successful patent were hundreds of failed experiments, thousands of pages of notes, and countless hours of steady, deliberate learning. Success isn't about brilliant moments, it's about brilliant preparation. Let me share what I call the patent principle. Every significant innovation is built on a foundation of small, daily improvements. When I was developing the light bulb, we tested over 6,000 different materials for the filament. Each test taught us something new. Each failure brought us closer to success. This wasn't random trial and error, it was systematic exploration. Think about what a patent really represents. It's not just a new invention, it's a culmination of knowledge, experiments, and insights. Each of my patents built on what came before. Each discovery laid the groundwork for future innovations. This is how real progress happens, not in leaps, but in steady, purposeful steps. I developed what I call the innovation pipeline. At any given time, I had multiple ideas in various stages of development. Some were just beginning as questions. In my notebooks, others were moving through experimental phases, and some were ready for patent application. This wasn't about spreading myself thin. It was about creating a systematic approach to innovation. Most people think invention is about that one big idea. But here's the truth. It's about developing hundreds of small ideas, testing them systematically, and recognizing which ones have potential. In my laboratory, we might work on dozens of different concepts simultaneously, each one carefully documented. Each experiment building our understanding create what I call development cycles. Every potential innovation goes through stages: initial concept, theoretical development, experimental testing, practical application, and finally, patent application. But these aren't separate steps. They're part of a continuous cycle of learning and improvement. Your daily hour of learning should feed directly into this development process. Every book you read, every experiment you conduct, every observation you make should be viewed as potential raw material for innovation. I didn't separate learning from inventing. They were part of the same continuous process. Remember, patents aren't endpoints. They're milestones in an ongoing journey of discovery. When I received a patent, I didn't stop thinking about that. Invention. I immediately started looking for ways to improve it, to apply its principles in new ways, to push the boundaries of what was possible, build what I call innovation networks. Every invention connects to others in unexpected ways. Principles discovered while working on the telegraph led to insights about the telephone. Problems solved in one patent often provided solutions for others. This is why systematic documentation is so crucial. It helps you see these connections. Your approach to innovation should be both methodical and opportunistic. Be systematic in your learning and experimentation, but be ready to recognize unexpected possibilities. Some of my most valuable patents came from seeing connections that others missed, from applying principles in new ways. Develop what I call patent thinking. This isn't about trying to patent everything. It's about training yourself to see the practical applications of your learning. When you study something new, ask yourself, how could this be applied? What problems could this solve? What possibilities does this open up? Most importantly, understand that innovation is a learnable skill. My 1,093 patents weren't the result of natural genius. They were the product of a systematic approach to learning, experimenting, and developing ideas. This is something anyone can develop with the right method and consistent practice. Create what I call innovation archives. Document everything: your ideas, your experiments, your failures, your successes. This isn't just for patent applications, it's for developing your understanding, for seeing patterns, for building on what you've learned. My notebooks were the foundation of my patent success. The real value of those 1,093 patents isn't in the number, it's in what they represent. A systematic approach to learning and innovation. A commitment to daily improvement, a method for turning ideas into reality. This is the true lesson of my patent record, and it's one that anyone can apply to their own journey of discovery and creation. Chapter 15. Quiet Beats. Clever in a world obsessed with noise, let me tell you about the power of silence. The greatest insights, the most profound discoveries, the real breakthroughs, they don't happen in the chaos of constant distraction. They emerge in the quiet moments of focused thought, in the deep silence of concentrated learning. Most people think innovation requires constant stimulation, endless input, perpetual connection. They couldn't be more wrong. In my laboratory at Menlo Park, I created what I called quiet zones, spaces where the only sound was the whisper of pencil on paper, the subtle click of experimental apparatus, the quiet breath of concentrated thought. Let me share what I call the silence principle. The quality of your thinking is directly proportional to your ability to create quiet, both external and internal. When I needed to solve a complex problem, I wouldn't seek more information. I would seek more silence. This wasn't about isolation. It was about creating the conditions for deep thought. Think about how your mind works in different environments. In noise and chaos, your thoughts scatter like startled birds. But in silence, they gather, connect, combine in new and unexpected ways. This isn't just philosophy, it's practical reality. My most significant breakthroughs came not in moments of frantic activity, but in periods of quiet contemplation. I developed what I call the quiet protocol. Before any serious thinking session, create a zone of silence, physical and mental. Turn off the noise, both external and internal. This isn't about meditation or mindfulness. It's about creating the conditions where real thinking can happen. Most people have lost the ability to think in silence. They fill every moment with noise, music, conversations, endless streams of information. But here's what I learned. The mind needs quiet to do its best work. Just as a microscope needs stillness to show fine detail, your mind needs silence to reveal subtle connections, create what I call thinking sanctuaries. These aren't just quiet spaces. They're environments designed for deep thought. In my laboratory, I had a small room where I would go when I needed to solve particularly challenging problems. No distractions, no interruptions, just pure focus. Your daily hour of learning should be protected from noise in all its forms. This isn't just about external sound. It's about the mental noise of unnecessary thoughts, worries, distractions. Train yourself to create islands of silence in the ocean of daily chaos. Remember, clever ideas often come from quick thinking, but profound insights emerge from quiet contemplation. When I was developing the light bulb, the breakthrough didn't come in a moment of brilliant inspiration. It came after hours of quiet, methodical thinking about the nature of electrical resistance. Build what I call silence habits. Start your learning sessions with a period of quiet. Let your mind settle. Let the day's chaos subside. This isn't wasted time. It's essential preparation for real thinking. The quieter you become, the more you can hear your own thoughts. Your approach to learning should prioritize depth over speed, understanding over accumulation. In silence, you can follow a thought to its logical conclusion, explore its implications, see its connections to other ideas. This kind of deep thinking is impossible in noise and distraction. Develop what I call quiet confidence. This isn't about being loud or assertive. It's about knowing that your best thinking happens in silence, that your most valuable insights emerge from quiet contemplation. True confidence doesn't need noise to prove itself. Most importantly, understand that silence is a tool, not a retreat. When I sought quiet, it wasn't to escape problems, it was to solve them more effectively. Silence isn't passive. It's an active state where real thinking can flourish. Create what I call thought spaces in your day. These aren't just breaks from noise. They're opportunities for deep thinking, whether it's early morning, late night, or stolen moments between tasks. These quiet periods are where real learning happens. The modern world will try to convince you that more noise means more progress, that constant connection equals constant growth. Don't believe it. The most powerful thoughts, the most innovative ideas, the most profound breakthroughs, they all emerge from silence. Train yourself to value quiet over clever, depth over speed, silence over noise, because in the end, it's not the loudest voice. That changes the world. It's the clearest thinking, and clear thinking needs quiet to flourish. Chapter 16. Legacy through learning. The greatest legacy isn't what you build, it's what you learn and pass on. When people talk about my legacy, they often focus on the inventions, the light bulb, the phonograph, the motion picture camera. But let me tell you about the real legacy, the 5-hour rule, the systematic approach to learning that made all those inventions possible. Most people think about legacy in terms of achievements, accomplishments, finished products. But the true legacy, the one that continues to shape the world long after we're gone, is the method, the approach, the system of learning and discovery that others can apply to their own challenges. Let me share what I call the legacy principle. The most valuable thing you can pass on isn't a specific invention or discovery. It's a way of thinking, a method of learning, a systematic approach to understanding and solving problems. This is what survives, what grows, what continues to create value long after specific technologies have become obsolete. Think about the real impact of the 5-hour rule. It's not just about spending time learning, it's about developing a systematic approach to growth and discovery. When you commit to this practice, you're not just building your own knowledge, you're becoming part of a lineage of systematic learners and innovators. I developed what I call the transmission method. This isn't about simply sharing information, it's about teaching others how to learn, how to think, how to approach problems systematically. In my laboratory, I didn't just train assistants to follow procedures, I taught them how to think, how to learn, how to discover. Most people focus on short-term results, immediate achievements. But real legacy thinking is about playing the long game. When I documented my experiments, my thoughts, my methods, I wasn't just keeping records, I was creating a blueprint for future innovation, a methodology that others could build upon, create what I call learning lineages. Every person you influence with your approach to learning becomes a node in a network of systematic thinkers. This isn't about creating followers. It's about spawning new generations of innovators who can take these principles and apply them in new ways. Your daily hour of learning isn't just about personal growth, it's about becoming part of something larger. When you commit to systematic learning, when you document your journey, when you share your insights, you're contributing to a legacy of continuous improvement and discovery. Remember, the greatest innovations often come not from individual genius, but from systematic approaches passed down and improved upon over generations. The light bulb wasn't just my invention, it was the product of a method, a system of learning and experimentation that can be taught and replicated. Build what I call legacy documentation. Record not just what you learn, but how you learn. Share not just your discoveries, but your methods. This isn't about ego. It's about creating resources that others can use to build their own systematic approach to learning and innovation. Your approach to learning should always include an element of transmission. How can you make your insights clearer for others? How can you document your methods in ways that others can apply? How can you contribute to the larger legacy of systematic learning? Develop what I call legacy thinking. This isn't about trying to be remembered. It's about creating value that outlasts you. When you approach learning systematically, when you document your methods, when you share your insights, you're creating ripples that can influence generations. Most importantly, understand that true legacy isn't about personal glory. It's about contribution to human knowledge and capability. The 5-hour rule isn't valuable because it came from me. It's valuable because it works, because it can be taught, because it creates results for anyone who applies it systematically. Create what I call learning artifacts. These aren't just notes or records, they're carefully crafted resources that can help others understand and apply systematic learning principles. Your notebooks, your documentation, your shared insights become part of a larger legacy of human knowledge. The world doesn't need more passive consumers of information. It needs more systematic learners, more methodical thinkers, more disciplined innovators. When you commit to the 5-hour rule, when you develop and share your own systematic approach to learning, you become part of this essential legacy. Build your legacy through learning, not by trying to be remembered, but by contributing to the ongoing human project of systematic discovery and innovation. Because in the end, the greatest legacy isn't what you achieve, it's how you enable others to achieve more. Chapter 17. You already have the time. Let me tell you the most common lie people tell themselves: I don't have time to learn. I've heard this excuse from some of the brightest minds, watched it rob them of their potential. But here's the truth. You don't find time. You make it. And you already have more than you think. Most people treat time like it's out of their control, like it's something that happens to them, rather than something they can shape. But in my years of invention and innovation, I learned something crucial. Time responds to intention. When you decide something is truly important, you find ways to make it happen. Let me share what I call the time audit principle. Most people have no idea where their time actually goes. They think they're too busy to learn, but they spend hours each day on activities that add no value to their lives or their growth. The first step to finding your learning time is to know where your time is really going. Think about this. In the time most people spend scrolling through social media, watching mindless entertainment, or engaging in empty conversations, they could have read several books, conducted numerous experiments, or mastered fundamental principles in their field. This isn't about judgment, it's about awareness. I developed what I call the time reclamation method. Start by tracking every half hour of your day for a week. Be brutally honest. Don't write down what you should be doing. Write down what you're actually doing. Most people are shocked to discover how much time they waste on activities that don't serve their goals. Most importantly, understand that small time blocks add up. You don't need huge chunks of uninterrupted time to learn effectively. I often made significant progress in 15-minute intervals between other tasks. It's not about having large blocks of time. It's about using whatever time you have effectively. Create what I call learning pockets. These are small segments of time throughout your day that you can dedicate to learning. The morning commute, the lunch break, the quiet moments before bed. These aren't inferior substitutes for longer study sessions. They're valuable opportunities. For consistent growth, your daily hour of learning doesn't have to be a single block. It can be 4 15-minute sessions, 6 10-minute blocks, or any combination that works for your schedule. What matters isn't the configuration, it's the consistency and the total commitment to that hour of growth. Remember, time management isn't about squeezing more activities into your day. It's about ensuring your most important activities get the time they deserve. Learning isn't something that should happen if you have time. It's something that should happen because you make time. Build what I call time barriers. These are protective boundaries around your learning time. Turn off notifications. Close unnecessary tabs. Create physical and digital spaces where learning is the only priority. This isn't about having more time. It's about protecting the time you have. Your approach to time should be proactive, not reactive. Don't wait for free. Time to appear, it won't. Schedule your learning like you schedule your most important meetings. Put it in your calendar. Make it non-negotiable. Treat it with the respect it deserves. Develop what I call time leverage. This means finding ways to combine learning with other necessary activities. If you exercise, listen to educational content. If you commute, use that time for mental practice or review. If you have routine tasks, use them as opportunities for systematic thinking. Most people wait for the perfect time to start learning systematically. They think they'll have more time next week, next month, next year. But here's the truth. There will never be a perfect time. The best time to start is now, with whatever time you have available. Create what I call learning triggers. These are cues that automatically lead to learning activities. The morning coffee becomes a signal for reading. The lunch break becomes time for review. The evening commute becomes an opportunity for reflection. Make learning a natural part of your daily rhythm. The world will always try to fill your time with urgencies, with distractions, with activities that seem important in the moment, but add no lasting value. Your job is to protect your learning time like the precious resource it is. Because in the end, how you use your time determines who you become. Make your time serve your goals, not the other way around. You already have the time you need for systematic learning. You just need to reclaim it from the activities that don't serve your growth. Start today. Start now. Because the time you think you don't have is already there, waiting to be used for something meaningful. Chapter 18. Begin like Edison. The time has come for action. We've explored the principles, examined the methods, understood the importance of systematic learning, but knowledge without application is like a light bulb without electricity, full of potential but producing no illumination. Let me show you how to begin your own journey of systematic learning and discovery. Start where you are. Don't wait for perfect conditions, ideal circumstances, or complete understanding. When I began my experiments with electricity, I didn't have a fully equipped laboratory. I had curiosity, commitment, and a systematic approach to learning. That's all you need to begin. The 5-hour rule isn't just a principle, it's a practice. 1 hour a day, 5 days a week, dedicated to learning and growth. This isn't about dramatic transformations or overnight success. It's about steady, systematic progress, small steps taken consistently that lead to extraordinary results. Create your learning sanctuary. It doesn't need to be elaborate. My first workshop was a humble space. What matters isn't the grandeur of your environment, but the quality of your focus. Find a quiet corner, a dedicated desk, a space where learning becomes your only priority. Begin with your notebook system. Remember what we discussed about turning notebooks into gold? Start today. Get a notebook, physical or digital, and create your sections: observations, questions, hypotheses, experiments. This isn't just record keeping, it's the foundation of systematic thinking. Protect your hour. Look at your schedule right now. Find your learning time. Maybe it's early morning, lunch break, or late evening. Whatever time you choose, guard it fiercely. This is your time for growth, for discovery, for building your future 1 hour at a time. Apply the scientist's mindset. Don't just read, investigate. Don't just memorize, understand. Approach each subject with curiosity and skepticism. Remember, you're not a student cramming for an exam. You're a scientist exploring reality. Let this mindset guide your learning. Build your mental workshop. Create your thinking tools: systematic note-taking, experimental mindset, connective thinking. These aren't just techniques. They're the equipment of innovation. Use them daily. Refine them constantly. Make them an extension of your mind. Start your first learning cycle today. Choose a subject that interests you, that challenges you, that offers possibilities for growth. Apply the principles we've discussed: deep focus, systematic documentation, experimental approach. Let this be the beginning of your journey. Remember the quiet principle. In our noisy world, create spaces for deep thought. Turn off notifications. Step away from distractions. Give your mind the silence it needs to do its best work. This isn't isolation, it's focused concentration. Begin building your legacy. Document your journey. Share your insights. Create resources that others can use. Remember, the greatest legacy isn't just what you achieve. It's how you enable others to achieve more. Make learning your daily practice. Not something you do when convenient, but something as essential as breathing. Let it become part of your identity, not just something you do, but something you are. Train your mental endurance. Start with what you can handle, then gradually extend your capacity for focused thought. Remember, it's not about dramatic breakthroughs, it's about consistent, systematic progress. Create your learning network. Find others who share your commitment to growth. Share insights, exchange ideas, challenge assumptions. Remember what we discussed about the company you keep. Make it count. Start your system today. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, not when circumstances are perfect. Today. Because every day you wait is a day of potential growth lost, a day of possible discovery missed. The path I've shown you isn't easy, but it is simple. 1 hour. A day systematic approach, consistent practice. This is how innovation happens. This is how discovery works. This is how you build something meaningful. You have everything you need to begin. The principles are clear. The methods are proven. The path is mapped. All that remains is for you to take the first step, to make the commitment, to begin your journey of systematic learning and discovery. Remember, every great innovation, every significant discovery, every meaningful contribution began with someone deciding to start, to commit, to pursue understanding systematically and persistently. Now it's your turn. Begin like Edison. 1 hour at a time, 1 day at a time, 1 discovery at a time. The future is waiting for your contribution. Start now. Start today. Start like your legacy depends on it, because it does.